It was more of the same for the Cincinnati Bengals in 2013 with perhaps a little bit of a twist. Third straight year they made the wild card round of the playoffs, third straight year that they went home early. They lost their wild card round playoff game. 2013 though they went 11-5. They did win the AFC North. They did show some improvement to me. I had big expectations for the Bengals, but they really, frankly, I think got embarrassed by the San Diego Chargers in that wild card playoff round. So I was curious to see with the Cincinnati Bengals, a team that I think had a lot of the pieces in place, but maybe they needed to figure out how to win. Maybe they needed to shake up the chemistry a little bit. Were they going to get aggressive and make some big moves in the offseason, or were they going to kind of stay pat and try not to rock the boat too much? Well, they kind of split the difference a little bit. They really didn't make any major moves in the offseason. They did lose Michael Johnson, one of their starting defensive ends, to free agency to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They lost Anthony Collins as well. They lost Andrew Hawkins to the divisional rival Cleveland Browns. So they lost some pieces, but I don't think their losses were overwhelming. They added Darquise Dennard in the first round out of Michigan State, but we'll have to see what, if any, contributions he'll be able to make right away as a rookie and maybe nickel and dime packages. Same thing with the Jeremy Hill, their second round pick. They were in a position where they could take best player available. We'll see if Jeremy Hill's able to crack that lineup right away, competing with Gio Bernard and Ben Jarvis Green Ellis. It doesn't look like at this point that he'll crack the lineup early on. So it's kind of one of these things where it seems like, in a way, they were drafting similar to the San Francisco 49ers in the sense of almost taking guys with redshirt years in mind. Now, looking ahead to 2014, I see plenty of strengths for the Cincinnati Bengals. I think their defensive line with guys like Geno Atkins and Dunlap and D'Amato Pecco, I think that is the strength of their defensive unit and arguably the strength of their team. This is a team with a very good defense, and it all starts up front with that front four. And Atkins coming back off of injury. Hopefully, he'll be back into the old Geno Atkins form. I'd expect that defensive line to be a very big strength of that defense and this team as a whole in this upcoming season. I like some of the offensive weapons that the Cincinnati Bengals have as well. Obviously, it starts off with A.J. Green. You've got one of the very best wide receivers in the National Football League outside. You look at some of the other pieces around him. Once he comes back from his foot injury, Marvin Jones was a bit of a revelation last year. Maybe a Mohamed Sanu can step up. He's a player that I've always kind of liked. I look at tight end. They've got two tight ends that can get the job done in Jermaine Gresham and Tyler Eifert. And then I also look at their running game, too. I think another real strength for the Cincinnati Bengals team. You've got Gio Bernard, Jarvis Green Ellis, second round pick Jeremy Hill. This Bengals team should be able to run the ball, run it effectively, run it consistently, and run in a variety of different ways. They can run outside, they can run between the tackles, they can run in all types of situations, downs and distances. So they've got plenty of strengths on this team, but they got some question marks too. I look at their secondary, and their secondary is kind of old, and some of the young players like the Dre Kirkpatricks and the Darquise Dennards need to step up and play well right away in 2014. Obviously, Andy Dalton is a huge question mark. The Bengals gave him kind of what you would classify as a big contract. And 3 years in, he's led the team to the playoffs each of the past 3 seasons, his first 3 years in the league. But he's also Andy Dalton, and he'll have those games where he plays incredibly. He has those games where he looks like damn near an elite quarterback. But then he has those other games where he looks like a mediocre, piss poor starter, and you wonder how the hell this scrub is starting in the National Football League. And unfortunately for the Bengals, especially the past 3 seasons, he has played very poorly in the playoffs. Is Andy Dalton going to step up and really establish himself as a franchise quarterback and really establish himself as the face of the Cincinnati Bengals franchise in 2014? And I also have some questions about the makeup of this team. It's one thing to get to the playoffs every year, and that there's something to be said about three straight playoff appearances. And I think they've made the playoffs 4 times in 5 years. The Bengals have had a good run of things in a way, but there's also something to be said about getting there and then not doing anything, getting there and losing your first playoff game. At some point in time, you either want to be terrible or you want to be great. Being mediocre or just kind of good isn't good enough. And does this team have the chemistry? Does this team have the makeup of a championship club? And I'm not sure that they do at this point. Looking at their 2014 schedule, just like everybody else in their division, they've got the AFC South, they've got the NFC South, And then their AFC conference games, since they finished first in the division, they get the benefits of joys of playing New England and Denver. Whoopee! So the schedule did not exactly do the Cincinnati Bengals any great favors. There's a couple of key stretches of schedule here for the Bengals that I think merit watching. They've got a 3-week stretch of home games in weeks 8, 9, and 10. That's against Baltimore and Jacksonville, and then I believe it's Cleveland as well. I think it is. That's a 3-week stretch, 3 straight games at home. If they're able to handle business in those home games, that will do a lot to really positioning themselves well at the top of the AFC North and keeping them in the mix in terms of the AFC playoff picture as a whole. And then they've got a 3-week stretch of road games, weeks 11, 12, and 13 against New Orleans, Houston, and Tampa Bay. And in that 3-week road stretch, we're coming off of 3 straight home games. You go to 3 straight road games. If they could sit there and find a way to go maybe even 2-1 in that stretch, they've got to feel really good about themselves heading towards the end of the season and the playoffs. Their keys to success, though, for this season, other than doing well in that stretch of schedule right there between weeks 8 to 13 with 3 straight home games and 3 straight road games, they need that secondary to play better. They need young guys like Kirkpatrick and Dennard to play well. They need Geno Atkins to come back to form. They need Marvin Jones back from his foot injury. They need Andy Dalton to progress and take that next step as an NFL starting quarterback. Ultimately, I think the Cincinnati Bengals are still, to me, even though they didn't improve a whole lot and you might argue got a tad worse, I still think they're the class of the AFC North, but the gap has narrowed significantly. I still think this is the best team in the division, and I still expect them to be in the mix all year in the playoff picture, and I expect them ultimately to win the AFC North and maybe finish with a record of 10-6. If they go 11-5 again this year, I think they've had a hell of a year. Now, ultimately, again, though, when we're talking about the Cincinnati Bengals, that's a success on the one hand, winning your division and making the playoffs. But the real question will ultimately be whether or not they're going to be able to do any real damage come playoff time. And that I have some serious questions about.